Border Environmental Forum. We're pleased to have you join us today. And now that we're starting the program, I would like to ask Dr. Calixto Mateos Hanel, the Managing Director of the North American Development Bank, and my boss, to come up and give some welcoming remarks. Calixto.
Muy bien. Pues bueno, buenos días y bienvenidos al Foro Fronterizo Ambiental México-Estados Unidos, el número 25, organizado por el Banco de Desarrollo de América del Norte. Como estamos en Estados Unidos, y para apoyar a la traducción simultánea, mis siguientes palabras ya van a ser en inglés. Good morning and welcome to the 25th Annual U.S Mexico Border Environmental Forum hosted by the North American Development Bank. The bank is excited about hosting today's event for the third time in 4 years. This forum has evolved over the years and would not be taking place today if not for the contributions of so many, including the Texas General Land Office, who founded the event in 1994, our friend Saul Sussman, the representatives of the 10 U.S. Mexico border states, keynote speakers, panelists, sponsors, bank staff, and you. The incredible show of support for the event truly illustrates the relevance of discussing the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Mil gracias. The theme for this year, for this year's forum, is the green economy and bilateral integration. What a perfect topic for the North American Development Bank to highlight, discuss, and contribute to, especially considering that the bank's mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance the environment and quality of life for the U.S.-Mexico border. To date, NADB has participated in 280 environmental infrastructure projects that have benefited more than 18.5 million U.S.-Mexico border residents. The bank has financed $3.4 billion in loans and grants. These projects represent a total investment of $10.5 billion. The bank, similarly to this forum, has evolved over the last 25 plus years. It is my hope that with each of you as friends, supporters, and contributors to the bank, that we can help the bank evolve to continue to improve the lives of the residents of the border for the next 25 years. Today's forum will bring people together from both sides of the border to collaborate in the exchange of information about the environment, economic development, and how to tackle climate change. Our keynote speakers include Mexican Ambassador to the United States, Estevan Moktezuma, Congressman Joaquin Castro, San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirmer, CGLA Infrastructure CEO and author Norman Anderson, and Google Cloud's Trinity Lloyd. Before I go any further, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Avisa Partners, Baker McKenzie, BayWa, Cachoca Bass and Newton, Canadian Consulate in Dallas, Genco, Grupo Gestión, Holland & Knight, IBC Bank, and Rich Mueller. Please join me in recognizing the sponsors with a round of applause. Finally, I would like to highlight that the ideal location for today's forum here in San Antonio, which has become an adopted hometown for me and many of the bank's staff. Now, let's get started with the program. It gives me a great honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Mexican Ambassador to the United States, Estevan Moktezuma. Let me talk a little bit about yourself, sorry. Ambassador Moktezuma, he was appointed ambassador to the United States of America by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He was ratified by Senate of the Republic in February 2021. He has held various high-level positions within the Mexican government, including Secretary of Public Education, Secretary of Social Development, Secretary of the Interior, and as federal senator, just to name a few highlights of his distinguished career. Now, please, Estevan, have the floor.
Thank you very much, Calixto Mateos and the rest of the NADBank team for organizing this very important event. I am very pleased to be here in San Antonio, especially because this iconic city has a special place in the history of the U.S. Mexico bilateral relationship. It was here in October 1992, under the shadow of an oak tree not very far from here, that NAFTA was first signed. Almost 30 years later, Texas' total trade with Mexico, 178 billion, is larger than the total trade between the United States and Germany. This is the power of this border. This is the power of these people. This city also serves as the headquarters of one of the few truly bilateral entities in the U.S.-Mexico relationship, which is the North American Development Bank. NADBank's evolution, as well as its challenges and many successes, provide good lessons for our future bilateral integrated border, its management, the green economy, and the creation of smart cities and future institution building. We already have NADBank as the product of an unprecedented binational collective effort to improve the environmental infrastructure of our 2,000 miles border. Our shared border is the backbone of our entire bilateral relationship. Border is opportunity. But we need to promote a bigger picture look. And the surrounding areas of the border and the border itself, because that is the path to change this region in the most notable way. This is not a political desire, but a true reflection of the facts on the ground. This region is home to more than 15 million people. It encompasses 48 countries in 4 American states and 94 municipalities in 6 Mexican states. Each one of the communities settled along the boundary line is integrated both economically and culturally with its neighbor. The combined economies of these 10 border states of Mexico and the United States could rank the border region as the 4th largest economy in the world. The border is opportunity. Thousands of commercial vehicles, pedestrians, and passengers cross every day through 56 operating border ports. About 80% of our bilateral trade crosses, about 80% of our bilateral trade crosses the border through land ports of entry via trucks or rail. $1 million a minute, or approximately $1.5 billion a day, are exchanged across our common border. Before the pandemic, 1.6 million people cross it every day. No space on earth has these dynamics. Stories of coexistence as residents on both sides of the border crossing back and forth to shop, to work, to attend school. Its territory is unique. The value and richness of its environment are truly incomparable. Our nation's wildlife refuges, incredible freshwater springs that are home to different endemic fish and turtles, as well as the mountains and the wilderness areas that we share, stand as a testament to this. Our common environment is one, and our shared water resources are perhaps the most important resource of all. From the Rio Grande, known as Rio Bravo in Mexico, to the Colorado River. Moreover, several transboundary groundwater aquifers underlie the border, which show how the hydrological system of our two countries are linked. The Rio Grande Valley, for example, is one of the fastest growing places in the United States. This growing, heavily Latino region depends almost entirely on the Rio Grande for water. It provides drinking and irrigation water to 6 million people and 2 million acres of farmland on both sides of the Texas-Mexico border. This is why Mexico advocates for practical and sustainable policies that look the border beyond a stretch of land or a stop in the migrant journey, but as a region in its entirely full potential. Our support of the NADB is cemented in this idea. During the past 25 years, our bilateral cooperation has been strengthened by the NADB's participation by assisting both countries in water and environmental. Its Frontera 2012 and Frontera 22 programs, with more than 351 projects, financed improved regional resilience and security. The Border 2020 program has seen even more improvement made to the region, with 50 projects undertaken in California, Arizona, Baja California, and Sonora. Collaboration between Mexico and the U.S. regarding border issues and water distribution has been an example to the international community. Just to cite one example, in 15 years, both governments have supported the implementation of more than 51 drinking water supply and wastewater infrastructure projects in Mexico. A total of 464 million US dollars were invested, 232 million from the U.S. Border Environmental Infrastructure Fund, and 232 from Mexican programs. In Mexico, these investments have led to the increased access to drinking water that grew from 87% to 96% coverage, sewerage system from 80 to 95%, and sanitation services from 21 to 91% of coverage in the period 2000-2015. In the same period, wastewater treatment has improved considerably. In fact, NADB participated in more than 86 water and wastewater treatment system projects, adding 33% of installed capacity in Mexico border states and over 90% in the 100 kilometers stripe of the border. There have been changes along the way, but we've always managed to find a bilateral solution. Since 1889, when the U.S. and Mexico first created the International Boundary Commission, IBC, we have worked together to improve some of our most vulnerable communities in the border region. The 1906 Water Treaty, which governs the northwest portion of the Rio Grande, and the 1944 Water Treaty, which institutionalizes the southeastern part, helped to create a true cooperation and partnership between our nations. It's impressive that these treaties, along the institutional framework that we have built under their umbrella since the 19th century, have stood the test of time. The International Boundary and Water Commission, SILA by its Spanish acronym, for example, has also evolved to create new methods to meet increasingly complex challenges. The IBWC helps mediate and monitor environmental and water conditions on both sides of the border, while organizations such as the North American Development Bank allow for improvements and financing at a regional scale. But the COVID crisis showed us that we can never be too prepared for a future we don't know. New infrastructure projects and the development of new water sources will be crucial in the years to come to guarantee that cities become more resilient, toward expected and unexpected shocks and deteriorating conditions. We need to create intelligent cities along the border. We need an umbrella to cover the overall picture and solve specific problems at the same time. For example, according to estimates by the Mexican section of the IBWC, around 80% of border communities have a water sanitation problem. This extends to smaller villages or individual farms and major cities and the areas around them. The most urgent example of all of this, without a doubt, is the situation in the Tijuana River. In the earliest days of the contamination crisis, millions of gallons of untreated sewage made their way into the Pacific Ocean after the collapse of a trunk line in Tijuana. Through a concerted effort that includes the Mexican and U.S. sections of the IBWC, the Tijuana State Public Services Commission, we managed to contain the problem. Cross-border flows to the United States decreased to almost zero from August to mid-December 2020. However, long-term solutions to these common challenges require joint cooperation, but also joint investments to carry them out. And that is why we need to strengthen our main tool, that is the North American Development Bank. I hope we can leave this meeting with specific tasks to raise the NADBank's visibility and promote its regional achievements. Working together means not only benefiting the economy and environment of both our nations, but the sustainable life of our societies. To achieve this, we must extend our transborder environmental collaboration, and this necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. At no other time in history of our nations has there been so great a need to solve a particular issue regarding water supply and drought-related shortage. In a post-COVID world with a climate change challenge, we need to reflect on the value of deepening our institutional collaboration towards effectively managing our environment and scarce resources. We have learned the hard way the implications of a sanitary crisis. As a region, we must prepare and strengthen our institutions to equip them with enough technology, information, and talent to address common challenges. If we're serious about solutions, we need to internalize the reality that sharing a border means sharing challenges, and most importantly, sharing solutions. We need smart cities and a smart border. Dear friends, the history of effective U.S. Mexico water cooperation carries implications for other joint challenges, pointing to the fundamental value of cooperation, flexibility, and above all, trust in the foundational instruments and management institutions governing the relationship. The effective management of the shared environment of the 10th largest border in the world requires adept institutions like the North American Development Bank that combine technical and political leadership with IBWC SILA. I am certain that they will remain crucial to the long-term well-being of the region. Thank you very much.
Let's give another round of applause to the ambassador. Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. We're going to move on to the first panel of the day, investment opportunities in the current environment. I would like to call up each of the panelists. I'd also like to call up the AV folks to mic up our panelists for the first panel. Dr. Calixto Mateos will be moderating the panel. I'd like to ask Pia from the Federal Reserve Bank, Pedro Romero Torres, Jessie Mcdougal, Benjamin Torres, and Claudio Rodriguez to please come up.
¿Esto qué hago con él? ¿En la bolsa? ¿Qué tal? Buen día.
¿Se escucha bien? Okay. So, well, once again, good morning, and I'm again Calixto Mateos, and I'm pleased to moderate the following panel. This panel focuses on investment opportunities and the current environment. We have a distinguished panel of experts who will provide their insight and experience on the topic. As we can all recognize, there are several factors at work in the current environment, including the COVID pandemic, green financing, or ESG, risk management, and border issues. Let me speak a bit about the format of the panel. I will introduce each panelist prior to their opening remark. And once they conclude their comments, we will move to the next panelist. Because I think I'm far away, so. Once all the panelists have given their remarks, I will post a few questions, and if time allows, we will open up to questions from the audience. Our first panelist is Pia Arrhenius, who serves as Vice President and Senior Economist for the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Pia is a labor economist working on regional economic growth and demographic change. She also manages the regional and macroeconomic group in the Dallas Fed Research Department. She is executive director of the quarterly publication Southwest Economy. We are excited to have Pia open the panel. She holds a PhD of economics from the University of California, Los Angeles, a bachelor's degrees in economics and Spanish from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Thank you for joining us, Pia, and please feel free.
Good morning. Okay,
Yes.
great. Maybe I'll
Well,
just
no,
start.
let me just say something. I have the pleasure of knowing Pia for many years. I met her when she started in the Federal Reserve, and she came often to visit at the Central Bank in Mexico. They are truly experts in the binational relationship as well. And Pia, you know a lot about the migration and things, and she's done extensive job researching that. So we are honored to have a panelist of such high level here as well. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you for the kind introduction. So Jessie wants us to be relaxed, so I'll just stay here and go through some slides. I was asked to give an economic outlook, but very quickly, and then touch on the points of the border economy and green finance. Let's see. Oh, this may not actually work from here. I may be too far away.
Where is the?
Oh, wait,
okay,
there it is. Oh, yeah, here we go. Great. Okay, so the U.S. economy is growing very quickly this year. We're expected to grow at over 6%, which is obviously 3 times or more than 3 times its normal rate of expansion. By the end of the year, unemployment is expected to reach under 4%. It's currently 5.5%. Labor market is seeing a very robust demand, but a very constrained supply. And every month, the Dallas Fed talks to we survey over 600 businesses in Texas, and difficulty hiring is a major issue. It's reaching sort of record status in terms of the difficulty hiring that businesses are telling us. The fiscal stimulus is the main reason the economy is doing so well. It's given a large boost to household incomes. Now it's tapering off somewhat, with many states have canceled some of those supplemental federal unemployment benefits. The large stimulus payments have gone out. But fortunately, wages are now picking up with the tight labor markets. That's going to fill some of that gap in stimulus spending. Consumer spending is still skewed toward goods and away from services. And that's the problem right now with the resurgence of the virus, because it's hurting the consumption of services. To get back to normal, we really need people to, consume fewer goods and more services, so we get back to sort of the normal balance of consumption in the economy. This distorted consumption of goods and the stimulus has led to supply chain disruptions. And so those are widespread. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And of course, partly as a result of that, inflation is spiking. And we expect it to remain elevated into 2022 at least. Let me just talk briefly about, the labor market employment growth accelerated in June and July, coming in at over 8% growth, annualized rate. The signs of a tight labor market are everywhere. So rapid wage growth. People are quitting their jobs at a record rate because they are very confident that they can find another job. Job openings actually exceed the number of unemployed workers. There's 1.2 job openings for every unemployed worker. And then, of course, the unemployment rate fell sharply in July. On consumer income and spending, just quickly, as I mentioned earlier, it's been a very unusual recession as a result of the pandemic, because income rose in the recession instead of falling, and consumption rose. And this was obviously due to the stimulus. Luckily, again, wages are picking up where some of that stimulus is leaving off. As we normalize spending, again, we're vulnerable to the virus because that affects the spending on services. This is just a picture where in the blue line, you can see personal income, including the stimulus payments. So you can see what incredible impact the stimulus payments in the US have had on personal income. In the red line is just personal income over time without those extraordinary stimulus measures. And so obviously you can understand why consumption has held up so well. And it's true for the US, it's true for Texas, and it's true for the border. Especially on the border, can you imagine those $600 a week unemployment benefits on the border where the cost of living is relatively low? It's been really a very generous benefit, and it's really had a very positive impact. Here you can see on the left, that's goods spending in the blue line, and on the right is services spending. And so in the red line is sort of the trend growth. And you can just see how distorted the spending on goods is compared to services. Services is far below trend, and goods spending is far above trend. Whether it's computers, cars, construction materials, the impact on the prices has come through that goods sector. That's where they're seeing most of the inflation, although we're starting to see it in services as well because wages are going up. So inflation, I think we may have higher inflation than Mexico at the moment in the US. CPI was up year over year, 5.3%. And so the argument is that inflation so far is pretty narrowly based, but we do expect it, of course, to become more broad-based. One of the main ways it's going to become broad-based, well, really there's two. One is rents, one is wages. With wages going up, and then with rents and house prices going up, that takes a while to work itself into the CPI, but it will. So let me just finish with saying a couple things about Texas and the border. So the Texas economy typically outperforms the US, and it did last year as well. It has overall in the pandemic done slightly better than the US. But this year, it hasn't actually grown faster than the US, and part of the reason is the winter storm in February really took a big bite out of our growth. It was a traumatic event for the economy and certainly for many households. Employment in Texas is still about 3% below pre-pandemic levels, so we still have a shortfall to make up for. Oil and gas, leisure and hospitality were our industries that were most hard hit. And of course, again, the COVID resurgence is the biggest downside risk to our outlook. I will remind, though, that the long-run indicators are still really positive for this region just because we have so much in-migration of people and firms. We're still number one in net people migration and corporate relocations in Texas. Plus, we have a very high rate of business formation just inherent to the state. So the long-run outlook is still very, very positive. The border economy has done slightly worse than the state. Overall, in terms of job loss, there's been slightly bigger job loss and a slower recovery. Of course, the shutdown of the border with Mexico, the shutdown to non-essential travel has certainly hurt a lot of businesses and some retail spending on the border. But overall, the stimulus payments have really maintained consumption, and households have done well on the border despite the slowdown that we saw last year. And it's coming back now. Housing markets, of course, are also doing quite well on the border. The rollout of USMCA, I mean, trade has picked up tremendously from where it was, a year ago. The rollout of USMCA has been slowed somewhat by the pandemic, but trade between US and Mexico, because consumption has been skewed so much towards goods, we had a very robust bounce back in manufacturing production in Mexico and exports to the US of all the things that people are buying. Last points about the energy transition and green finance that Calixto wanted me to just touch on. So the energy, with really so much energy production concentrated in Texas and in Mexico, obviously, the transition away and to renewables is going to be a challenge. It's going to require investment, of course, in renewable energy, but also the right regulations. When you start looking into why, for example, do you wonder why Texas has no solar? I had to look into that. Well, because we don't have the regulations where, households that install solar panels can sell their surplus electricity back to the grid. So if they could just change that, we could have more solar energy in Texas. Little things like that make a big difference. I think when we talk to our energy companies that our contacts in the energy industry, what they say is that obviously they're going to have a shrinking role going forward in terms of fossil fuels, but they are going to still have an important role while we're transitioning to renewables. Obviously, the transition is going to depend on technology, especially battery technology, in terms of how do we store power. And then, of course, there's other helpful policies. Economists dream about a carbon tax, which I guess just, not ever going to happen. I wanted to say on green finance, it's really an irreversible trend, and I wanted to say that because politicians come along and sometimes they're not, want to have the conversation about the environment and climate change. But I think that despite the political wins, this is an irreversible trend. Asset managers, banks, financial markets are considering climate-related risk increasingly. Regulators are requiring in other countries, for example, climate disclosures, climate change, stress testing, better data and risk analysis, and so that's just spreading. It's going to continue to spread despite the politics. And insurance markets obviously are very vulnerable, and so that's another reason we're going to continue to see this discussion. Even if we're not leading on this issue in the U.S. at the moment, we may still do so eventually. And that's it. Thank you, Calixto.
Thank you very much for this thorough explanation, and very clear, by the way. I think now we have a great picture of what's going on in the macro area. The panel, of course, it's about how's the environment and everything. So we're going to go from this general overview of the region to more on Tijuana, and maybe talking a little bit more on green finance, what Pia just taken, and the challenges on that. And then we'll go more specific with what are the legal situation in the border, and what are the opportunities for investment in the border. So our next panelist comes from Tijuana, Baja California. We are pleased to have Don Pedro Romero, who has a long record of entrepreneurial success in trade, industry, tourism, construction, and urban development. Throughout his career, he has chaired various business institutions such as the Council of Economic Development of Tijuana and the Chamber of Commerce, Services and Tourism in Tijuana. Currently, he is the CEO of the Border Economic Zone and coordinates the Consultative Council of former presidents of the Business Coordinating Council. Adelante, Don Pedro. Please feel free to use the podium.
No sé si puedo usar
the clicker. Yes, thank you.
Más fácil para mí. Correcto, no traigo.
No, no traes eso.
Solamente voy a compartir. I would like to share some vision. That's it. And thank you so much. It's a very pleasure and a privilege to be here. And this time, what I would like to share with you is a vision of future. As a businessman and having working with China 45 years, I have seen and oriented 17 countries. It's one of my jobs have been to know how every country is doing, what they have done in order to be successful. So I would like to introduce with this vision of future, really this border, all the Mexican border, north and south, south of the United States, north of Mexico. We have huge opportunities to develop. We are trying, this is in the interest of the Mexican government and of the United States to attract investment to this area. And the name of the game for future is innovation and technology. The nearshoring industries, industries with higher added value, and focusing industry of future, security and military sectors, microchips, new materials, conductors, batteries, electric vehicles, hybrids, clean cars and trucks, green economy, sustainability, energy, renewables, and natural resources. We wonder why in 28 years or something like that in the NAFTA and now the new treaty, how come we have not been able to develop the most important and competitive region of the world? We have all, in both sides of the border, we are able to develop such a region. The basic assumption of this is because the name of the game is geopolitical. United States is not only North America. North America means Canada, U.S., Mexico, and Central America included. If we are trying to develop one super mega region. Now, right now, China has 19 super mega regions. Every single region, they have 100 million people, inhabitants there. All the treatment that we are now developing should consider that we have to develop an intelligent border plan, borderless, a plan for 21st century to convert the border in the most competitive region in the world. We have to implement a knowledge-based economy. Again, we have to focus in technology, innovation, research, investment, supply, and value chains. We have to develop the connection, which is very important, complementarity, cooperation, coordination, complexity to achieve competitivity. We are talking about intelligent borders, smart cities, smart government, smart business, and smart people. Our ambassador in Mexico and United States have put together several groups of experts and counselors in order to try to rescue, to see how we can face the future. And we are not able to grow too much unless that we can solve the problems that we have in infrastructure. And still, in the previous year, these meetings found that the main problem, the priority problem was water. The second one is energy, and the third one is mobility and transportation, and the fourth one is the environment. So still, this is the priority infrastructure. And this kind of recommendation or actions comes from think tanks or groups of experts, and for some cases, sometimes do not represent the views of an opinion of the government. The proposal must be taken as general ideas or recommendations and opportunities. Proposals are based on historical principles of interdependency and cooperation, understanding that what happens in either side of the border affects the security and prosperity of the United States and Mexico. Likewise, on a strategic geopolitical vision that promotes the future development and progress of the United States-Mexican border region, and that benefits the common good, sustainability, complementation, cooperation, and coordination are conditions for development. Cities from both sides of the border create a mega economic region. Furthermore, if we were to include all the major cities in these neighboring states along the border, such as Los Angeles, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Hermosillo, Chihuahua, Torreón, Saltillo, Monterrey, we will have a potential to create a powerful super mega region. Since NAFTA, other regions of the world, such as the East, Orient, have advanced spectacularly to the point of representing an important competitor now. Recommendations. This document presents a summary, including recommendations and some examples of projects of high importance for the future of the region. It is deemed necessary to recommend at all levels related to these issues the convenience of developing a new strategy for the U.S.-Mexican border. We found 6 priorities, and it seems relevant. The first one, increase in the technological capacity of business. The second one, create a powerful talent bank. The third one, develop a new scientific, technological, and industrial culture. The fourth one, redefine the role of state of government participation in science and technology, infrastructure, business facilitation, financing, and promotion. Establish a greater border region in order to form a super mega region. And the sixth one, achieve competitiveness in a global market context. Just for a minimum reference, along the border, every city in the Mexican side have shown or is asking for financing for several projects. The case of Mexicali, for instance, this is the worst problem that we have in the environment. It requires a solution, technology, financing, and there are many projects there. It's clean in order to get clean water and energy, and produce energy. In the cluster Aeroespacial, they show 6 projects, new projects, advanced projects, that also they are able to receive financing. There are programs to create enterprises, start-up, that they are doing very well. In the case of Ciudad Juárez, for instance, they are the gates. We need a new gates for great truck. We need also, we have now one example for a big plant that is going to produce microbuses, electrical. In the case of Matamoros, they need to rescue 100 stations of bombs and in order to manage the water. Laredo is the second port of the United States and Mexico, and we really need a new gate there. There's a good project called 245, which is so important to transfer and to move a lot of merchandise. Sonora and Baja California Sur also, they have projects in energy and water. We also are trying to see whether we can establish or to initiate a transportation metropolitan autovías in 5 cities. They are able to, we need to move people from one side to another, one in Tijuana, in Mexicali, Ciudad Juárez, in Reynosa, and Laredo. They are able to build a new mass transportation. So the Aeroespacial, they have the intelligent manufacturing is something that we are trying to develop there. Advanced robots and automation, sensors, digital information, platforms, artificial intelligence, Internet of the Things. In the coast of Baja, we are trying to also to develop the production of alga, technology for growing alga in ponds for human consumptions. This is an important source of proteins and nutrients for the future worldwide. There is also one project that they are presenting for Laguna Salada, the three lagoons. This is an alternative to establish projects in adjacent regions in Laguna Salada and Mexicali. the Colorado River Delta, and the Salton Sea in California, through a comprehensive plan that addresses the needs of the region, through the sustained restoration of water resources, green energy, and agriculture. So this is the more or less, I don't think that we were talking with Don Calixto. We need money, but it's not enough. So many projects, so many needs. But we have to find the ways to help. Maybe we are not able to build such kind of the factories as the past maquiladoras, twin plants, where they based with the low salaries. We need to, and we are trying to do it, to increase the level of the salaries for the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don Pedro, and I think that gives a big picture of what's the opportunities around. Now our next panelist, as you see, I'm going more in the general to more specific topics. Jessie Mcdougal focuses on origination of investments in infrastructure and clean growth across North America in her role at the UK Export Finance. She has worked as the CFO and director of an industrial manufacturing firm, as well as the co-founder and CFO of a quantitative hedge fund. She worked in investment banking at BMO Capital Markets in Canada and in London, advising large cap Canadian companies in the early 2000s. Jessie was a vice president and portfolio manager at Barclays Capital on the equity derivatives proprietary trading team in London. Thank you, Jessie, and please feel free to make your presentation.
Thank you. Is this working? You can hear? Bueno. My name is Jessie Mcdougal. I work with UK Export Finance, and we are an export credit agency. I lead the North American practice. I'm based in Houston in this role. And we were founded, actually, we're an arm of the British government, and we were founded in 1919. We were the first export credit agency globally. And our goal is to make investments. We're debt financing partners. We make investments globally where there are elements that include the UK supply chain. So where we're bringing our expertise or our technology or some of our engineering and other services and goods into the project, we can provide a multiple of that UK supply chain component in terms of debt financing for projects. So I can give you some examples. I focused on the long-term debt financing projects that I'm looking to originate and source. So our financings can be from 2 to 10-year instruments. And typically the sponsor has to have some equity component up to about a minimum of 15%. And then we can look to finance the remaining 85% of the projects. So we look across all sectors, although I have to say that the points that have been made today around intelligent cities, water projects, and clean growth and infrastructure is very much what we're targeting from a policy point of view with the UK government in terms of the projects that we're looking to support. We want to have a big component of renewables projects and clean growth mobility solutions for cities. So I think this is actually very relevant for the cohort today. So across sectors, but we have a lot of experience with infrastructure projects. So we have provided about 800 million of financing to an offshore wind project in Taiwan. We provided about 60 million of financing to a Mexico City transportation infrastructure upgrade quite recently. We have our largest project was an urban mobility transport project in Cairo. We provided 2.3 billion of support to a monorail system in Cairo. And so a lot of those projects were bringing a combination of the financing and the UK expertise and to global counterparties. And so we have supported projects in over 200 countries. We can also operate in other currencies. I think we've worked in up to 60 other local currencies, so it doesn't have to be sterling denominated investments or dollar denominated investments. We can sometimes come to you with your currencies. So that's basically what I wanted to share. Is I'm really excited to meet with folks who are looking to originate projects in the U.S. and Mexico, and certainly the border region projects that have been discussed with the North American Development Bank are of great interest to us at UK Export Finance. So thank you.
I don't know, Benjamin, you have slides?
I do, Calixto.
If you could just handle the clicker, please, so that we can. Okay, let me introduce you. Well, first, as you see, the topics and some of the mentions in the previous conversations, one important thing is innovation. There's a lot of issues with water. There's a lot of challenges and opportunities with transportation. The following panels that we'll have in this forum will tackle each of any of those specific topics. I mean, I invite you to be to attend them. It all follows the same guiding idea and the same underlying problems and opportunities we face in the region. So I just give you a heads up so that you will be waiting for those panels as well. Our next panelist, and as I go more on the specific now, we're going to take the advantage of learning more about the legal perspectives and the opportunities that are in the border region. Benjamin Torres is a partner at Baker McKenzie's Mexico City office and leads the Energy, Mining, and Infrastructure Practice Group in Mexico, and is a member of the EMI Global Steering Committee at the firm. Benjamin is the president of the Energy Committee in AmCham, Mexico. In addition, he has lectured for the Energy and Sustainability Law Master's Degree Program at Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León and taught energy law classes at Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez and business law at ITESM, the Monterrey Tech campus in Ciudad Juárez. Thank you, Benjamin, and adelante, por favor.
Muchas gracias, Calixto. And thank you for the North American Development Bank for inviting me over today. It's certainly been a pleasure, and it's very exciting that we are able just to meet again in person, right, and to exchange some ideas. I do have a couple of very short minutes to talk about, and maybe that will just lead to a further conversation later on with my colleague panelists. I think when we're talking about investment opportunities, not only from the legal side, I think it's very difficult just to set aside ESG. ESG is a very trending word. It's everybody's talking about that. And it does have legal components, financing aspects, but I think it encompasses a broader impact that, when we enter into the pandemic, I think, at least on my end, we went into the pandemic and we all woke up just knowing about ESG, energy transition, and all this rapid change that the energy companies are suffering through the different landscape that we're confronting. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Environmental is not only thinking about just the environment. It encompasses energy transition. It goes on sustainability, air emissions, and much, much broader than that. It's a very large aspect and concept that it will contain all of this. And what is so important? Well, I think all of the companies, whether those are in the services, those companies are in the financial aspects of it, the oil and gas companies, all of them are looking into this. And it is extremely important, not only because it's an altruist focus and oriented mean, but also because it gives money. It gives money to the companies. And with all of that, you know, it raises your profile. It will manage your risk, and it will increase your returns. Companies like BlackRock, and many other funds, you know, they have completely been vocal about dedicating 100% and just selecting funds that will be ESG compliant from now on. So this is really a game changer, you know, and we have to keep in mind that it's not, you know, all of the companies are just not doing it because it looks good. It does look good, but it also brings the money back. And this was accelerated by the pandemic, by the rapid technology advances, you know, all of the storage opportunities, the renewables. The renewable energy by 2050 is going to be 50% of the power generation capacity in the world. In just 3 or 4 years, we have seen the reduction of solar generation on the manufacturing of the panels, on the technology and the ability to generate solar, just about 40, maybe 50% of what usually cost. The wind turbines in 4 years reduced 30% of their actual cost. So this, no one can stop it. And I think all the companies, you know, the legal services, the financing service, they really have to look into this. As you can see, you don't only manage risk, you don't only makes you look good in the firm profile, but you know, there are many other aspects that will bring a benefit for VSG. I mean, if you can see on why is your investment decision making, you know, fiduciary duty is one of the most important ones. In the last couple of years, from Brazil to United States, there were more than 500 regulations on governance that were just enacted and created just for that. So the companies, they have to be compliant. But also coming back to the same point, it looks good, but it brings you money. You know, as you can see, you know, from the drivers that why you incorporate ESG into your investment decision making, the altruist, you know, the good profile is one of the last ones. But just managing risk and creating value is one of the most important ones. You can see on these slides, you know, what all of the different companies in the oil and gas industry are doing. Many of them now are dedicating investments into energy efficiency, energy transition, carbon capture, all those types of renewable and energy amicable environments and projects, from BP to Total, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, and many others. I'll invite you to look into the webpage of any one of these companies. Each one will have a video talking about how important is the sustainability and the green energy for them. And they realize, and they will become net zero, most of them by 2050, including BP, Shell, Total, Repsol, who is not in here. Many of those companies, they have assumed specific commitments to become net zero by 2050. And they have going to be capturing the different scopes, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 of the different air emissions in methane and carbon capture during certain thresholds and certain timelines. The scope 1 is the emissions that they create, that they produce as a consequence of their own activities. Scope 2 are those that are related to electricity, thermal, and many others that indirectly affects them. And scope 3 are the ones that are generated and originated by their own customers and suppliers. So they're not only concerned about what they're doing with their operations, but they're also concerned with their off-takers, with the different partners, with the different associations with that, and the different clients and suppliers that they have. They all are concerned about that. As you can see, on all these different numbers, they do assume specific commitments that most of them are very similar. One of them will be in 2050, the other ones will be in 2030. Some of them will assume a 50%, some of them will assume 100%, but they are talking about the same line. And I think this rapid evolution of these companies that are just migrating into green energy and renewable arena is just really good, a good message for all the companies and how the financing structure should be developed. Climate change creates also a lot of opportunities and challenges for the financing sector. On one hand, You know, you have to evolve through the energy transition. You also have to make sure that the electrification of the vehicles, the smart apps, and all these rapid technology changes are adaptable to the financing sector. But also, climate change, presents some challenges, such as the fact that real estate, in the low-lying aspects, in the coast, in the ocean, is being affected by climate change, by floods, by the fires in the forest. All of those have affected the different crops, the real estate, and I think, under the risk management, the banks and the financing institutions, they do have to assess all of these aspects. This is just really a big view of what energy transition is. Obviously, I don't have a lot of time, and we could have a complete seminar about energy transition, but it's really a fascinating topic that we should all talk about. Get back to you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I think you're opening some of the other topics that we also want to consider about how the ESG works and how, and I think it's a very good summary of as you say, it's enough material to have another seminar on it, but this really covers the basics and the overview of it, and it's a very, very clear one. Thank you very much. And well, last but not least, I'll have Claudio Rodriguez. He serves as the Mexico City office leader for Holland & Knight and focuses his practice on energy and infrastructure matters. With experience in several Latin American markets and more than 16 years in close connection with the energy market in Mexico, Claudio has extensive experience representing developers, procurement firms, producers, investors, contractors, suppliers, and multilateral institutions in all phases of the development, M&A, and financing of energy projects. Thank you, Claudio. Adelante.
Thank you so much. I do not have a presentation. However, I would like to, first of all, to thank NetBank. Calixto, thank you so much for this invitation. We would like to start because this panel talks about opportunities, no? So indeed, I think that we are not going to discuss what is going on the energy market right now in Mexico because we already know it. However, we still see opportunities in Mexico, no? This is important because obviously we have seen the departure of several companies from Mexico or struggling financially, which opens obviously some other opportunities. I would like to start saying that the companies, even private or public, they are better when they are accompanied or they are working together side by side with the other side of the table. We have seen in the past that CFE, Pemex, they had a close collaboration with private companies in Mexico in the past, creating value to what they do. Since 2013, with the energy reform, Pemex and CFE, they are no longer paraestatales, as we previously known, but they are empresas productivas del Estado, they're productive state companies. And this single small change, I think it is very important because they are, by law, they shall create value to the Mexican state. And there are several ways in which they can create value to the Mexican state. So far, they have understood that the way to create value to the Mexican state, which is expressly in the Pemex law and CFE law, is by going alone. And this is a political decision. It is a sovereign decision, which we obviously respect. However, we would like to open the discussion that the opportunities, the money, the value, the technologies are in place for them to take advantage of those capabilities of the private sector, for them to create value to the Mexican state. It is not against the Mexican state. It is a mechanism, it's a collaboration to create value to the Mexican state. I have drafted a PhD dissertation, which I will soon defend, hopefully, And I talk exactly that the policies in the energy sector has to be seen under the common good. No, the energy sector is broader than the private sector. The energy sector is broader than the public sector. The energy and every kind of infrastructure project, water, roads, waste to energy, have to be seen as a common good. And why the common good? Because we have seen, and this is a fact, we have seen in Turkey, we have seen in Greece, we have seen in Spain, we have seen in Germany the last month, what happens if we don't see the common good. I mean, we have to create, and all these companies that my friend Benjamin have listed, no, they have changed their mind. They are not anymore oil companies. They are now energy companies, and they have seen the common good. And this is a very short list, but there are so many others, like Galp in Portugal, no, that they have changed their vision because now they understood that it is not sovereign to implement policies against the common good. No, so I would like to start with this reflection that even the state-owned companies, as Pemex, CFE, and any other, because many of these companies are state-owned, like Lukoil, many others, no? So that state companies, even state-owned, they are better if they understand the common good of the planet, no? It sounds corny, if you want, no? But it is a fact. I mean, they are changing because the planet is changing. So the big question is, how can we collaborate with financial institutions? How can we collaborate with the private companies, with the public sector to create this common good? No? And I would like to start with that reflection.
Thank you very much.
I think it's actually a very good starting point. I mean, and I think it goes also to what Benjamin was saying about the definition of ESG and especially in the part of environment. When we speak about the environment, it encompasses all. It's a broader thing. It's not the normal conception of just and it's not just the immediate consumption. We need to think long term. We need to think on how we're going to make the resources available forever, and how we're going to get the world to work forever. And so it has a broader definition that encompasses governance as well. It's funny because the environmental needs governance, and the environmental needs political will, and the environmental needs science, and we all need to work towards the environment. Now, if we go a little bit more to the panelists, I would like to, I mean, if you have some comments on this matter, on how you see the financing, let's say, evolving in the future. I think it's clear it goes more on the green financing is here, as you were to say, it's here to stay. And I think it's beyond a political discussion. As it was mentioned, dealing with the environment is money. I mean, if you do processes that are sustainable, you are actually saving money. You're using less resources, less energy, and that makes more efficient use, and it makes more sense financially. If you're thinking about considering the climate risk changes, and you're doing finance, you need to understand, I mean, if you're doing a certain industry in a certain area, which depends on the current environmental conditions, and that particularly is going to change, you need to factor in those changes to see how much you invest in that, or how you invest, or because it could render your assets useless in a few years if you do not take into consideration. So because of that, and because of the financial aspect of where the money is going is putting an emphasis on climate, and that's going to help transform the world, as you were saying, I mean, on a more rapid pace. So that's one thing I might also add to
the summary. So I don't know if any one of you want to talk a little bit about that, the green finance, and then we go and maybe talk about the how the border can transition to a greener economy. Any comment, anything? I don't know, or that's fine. Or if we can see, you know, maybe for Don Pedro, if you could look at your crystal ball, what one sector investment would help the border the most over the next 25 years? I mean, you have a lot of experience and you might be able to give some insights.
Sorry, again, the most important?
What would be the one sector investment that will help the border the most over the next 25 years?
Well, now we are talking about the smart cities. And Mexicali, for instance, is a project that this could be a good example. And we can start in different ways, not only in energy, with water, and also in the air. There are 3 or 4 types of offers that I think that I am recommending strongly to contact with NADBank. Not only because NADBank could be the ones who can solve financial problem, but I think NADBank has another position in order to attract or to join with others to invest for Mexicali. In the border, perhaps also is very important, the new port, Puente 45 is very important. You know, there are hundreds or maybe thousands of containers every single day. This is not possible to solve the problems only increasing the lines in the old ports. We need to create something new in order to work together, both authorities. And I think that this is also very important. NADBank have to be there with others also. It's as important as is the other one. Perhaps the third one, there are places like, for instance, Sonora and Baja California. Sonora now, there's a new governor coming, and the president had been there, and he was very interested to help for the energy. As I say, they are working in this kind of things. Baja California Sur also is not enough water and energy, and they have, maybe they are here, they came here, they have a good plan for it. It's something that is working in both sides of the border. With people, they can also get the financing from other sources, but the NADBank, I think they have to be there as a partner. Both governments must also to be together at the time when we are discussing such kind of projects. So transportation also, we have offers even from China. China wants to finance, and the only thing they are requesting is that we have to find a way to make a partnership, including the government. China, in order to come here, they said they would like in the table to be with the United States, Mexico, and China together. And they are talking about the big, huge, long-term projects. So it's something that also our governments must consider seriously. But NADBank, again, I think it must be part of that.
If I expand a little bit on the smart cities, I think it's a concept that's come and it's mostly referred sometimes as only the internet and technological artificial intelligence aspects. But I think if we think about the environmental part and think smart cities actually having good planning of a city. When, how is it going to grow? Where is it going to grow? How are you going to provide the basic services? And of course, you need to use data and a lot of technology as well but it's more on the planning of how to implement things, which systems you have, how is going to be the transport system, how it's going to be the water distribution. And in that sense, I think for the border, it's extremely necessary, given that it's such a vibrant, growing economy. And as Pia was mentioning, I mean, it's one of the most dynamic regions of the U.S. and Mexico. I mean, both sides are growing, and thinking about having a big mega region. Yes, it is true. It is one aspect that it could grow and that will need to have a smart way of doing things. So I don't know, any other comment that I can get from the panel? I don't know if anybody wants to and have some questions. Sí, come in.
As a remark, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was taking off my microphone, so I'm trying to speak louder. I think this is a rapid change, and coming back to your question where you asked, what do we see for the border in the upcoming years? I do not have a crystal ball, obviously, but if we analyze and we think over that, renewable projects, particularly solar and wind, are going to be reducing, and according to the forecast, it's going to be 50% of the power generation in 20 years from now, and 25 years from now. And if we, we put that together with the difficulties in securing interconnections, developing transmission lines, and securing real estate rights, and also the fact that companies and regulations such as inside the fence power projects and isolated supply, all of these projects, I think they come together. I would see that a lot of off-takers are going to be generating their own power, and they're not going to be relying more on the public utilities. And I'm saying that because on one side is the regulatory struggles and challenges that we have, but on the other hand is the technology. The technology is progressing rapidly to the way that if you can couple the solar generation with the storage on the battery that is supposed to come up in a few years from now, I think we will no longer need from the public utility to be providing power, and that is going to create opportunity not only for the households but also for industrial developments, commercial, by all means. And I think those are going to be needing financing, whether that is a large scale or that is going to be medium and small scale. I would see that with projects such as hydrogen that with the combined with electrolysis, with solar and wind, can also be an interesting area. The real challenge is regulation. I think regulation hasn't been made up to the progress that we have reached in terms of technology. So I think regulation, coming back to the legal point, and is going to be the greatest risk for financing into those projects, because I think it will make sense business-wise, but it's going to have a lot of uncertainty with respect to the regulation, and I think that's going to be the key challenge. All of the companies, again, they're trying to invest in this. Not only the Shells, and I mean companies like Shell, they have rebranded themselves. They're no longer an oil and gas company. They think themselves as an energy transition company. And you saw from the numbers, they're going to be dedicated 50% of their funds, of their assets, of their efforts to sustainable investment, whether that is going to be biofuels, whether that is going to be hydrogen. All of that is going to be the focus of their investment, and not only the oil and gas. You can talk about the engines. You can talk about the EDF. EDF is no longer a power company. They brand themselves as EDF Renewables, focusing on the renewable energy. That's a big rapid change. Coming back to what Claudio was saying, I think the real challenge is, to have a state-owned industry, even in Mexico, to grasp this rapid change. Because I think Claudio is absolutely right that, all of those companies abroad and even within Mexico and the United States, they are doing and embracing this change. And, I think the real challenge is, to adapt and to improve it in Mexico as well, because that's going to be the key sector. So coming back to your question, to finalize my thought, is that I would see a lot of renewable projects in the border in the next 5-10 years. And we're going to see it not in the traditional way that we think of a large scale solar renewable project, out there on an isolated land, but we are going to see in the cities. We're going to see it in the real estate developments. We're going to see in the industrial parks. And it's not going to happen in 1 or 2. It's just going to be happening all at once in the next 5 years, I think.
Yes. I agree with you with your presentation, because many decisions of companies headquartered abroad, they are coming to Mexico with this vision of ESG that you perfectly submitted. No?
Yes.
They say, I don't care. I shall have power inside, behind the fence, renewable, solar, wind, cogeneration, hydrogen, because it is a mandate that I have in my headquarters in wherever it stands. No? So I think this is going to be, as you perfectly said, this is going to be a driver. We have started already seeing this in Mexico, global companies in Mexico that they have a factory in Mexico and they say, I don't care. I shall have panels on my roof because it's my compromise globally, headquartered in Russia, Houston, New York, whatever. No? So I think you're perfectly right, Benjamin.
I think it just fits perfectly in what we're discussing, and I think it rounds the discussion very neatly. I saw that there was a question out there. You had it first, and then Jerry. If you want to go first.
Would you like to go to the microphone, please? That's your question. Yeah.
La base en español, la puse aquí en la aplicación. Cuando se habla de inversiones, donde yo veo que tienen dos impactos del retorno, donde un retorno es financiero y otro retorno es social. Por ejemplo, en proyectos de agua, donde a veces uno, si lo ve como financiero, no te interesa el proyecto, porque a lo mejor hay otro proyecto que tiene más retorno, pero sabes que eventualmente va a ser importante invertir en tema de mayor aprovechamiento del agua. Aquí que estamos hablando de un tema muy financiero o muy de negocios. ¿Cómo se hace la mezcla entre los factores sociales y financieros para convencer a inversionistas de que el proyecto es necesario y va a tener un impacto tanto financiero como social?
Sí, no sé si alguien quiere primero tocar, si no le puedo dar.
Primero el experto.
¿Tú quieres?
No, tú.
Bueno, yo ahí te diría, justamente cuando estamos hablando de finanzas verdes, I'm going to switch again to English, but sorry. When we're talking about green finance, now we have to consider all those aspects. I mean, if it's sustainable, you have to consider the social aspect as well, because it's actually people who you're talking to. I mean, in the long run. So by introducing the green finance and by having the ESG being more, that's correcting a bit of what your concern is, and going more on the social aspects. If I go specific to what we do in NADBank and everything, being a binational development bank, our focus is actually on seeing that the projects are working and attaining its value in terms of its impact in the environment, in the health, in the well-being of the people of the border. A successful project for us, it's attaining that, and of course it has to cover the financials. But the financials, if it's just right there, just on the minimum, it's okay as long as it covers the objective that it's been set for. So I think that would be more or less the answer to it. If we go to another question, Jerry, please.
Good morning, excellent panel. Good morning. I'm Jerry Schwebel. I'm from Laredo. My question is, I have two questions. First one is to Pia. I read everything you write, Bea, by the way.
Thank you.
In your chart, in your graph, you mentioned very vividly the difference in regards to goods versus services. And we're a border community. I'm in Laredo, Texas, so for me, services is my bread and butter. The goods come across, but the services that we provide on the border is what generates the jobs on the border. And during USMCA, we spent so much time in energy talking about trade surplus versus goods, trade surplus in goods versus trade surpluses in services. I'd like your opinion, your thoughts in regards to how do we see that argument of trade impacting trade jobs versus jobs and goods and goods. And what is the relationship if that trend will continue? Because when we're talking about jobs, that's what we're talking about in USMCA. That would be my first question. And the second question to the panel that I would like to take advantage of the opportunity. The border is made up primarily of small, medium-sized enterprises, and great to see a great entrepreneur and a businessman and Pedro Romero here, that we all need to listen to that kind of rhetoric and talk of those of us that live on the border and have some good common sense ideas to talk about. But the green that we in the border listen to that are related to those small businesses is the green US dollar. So we don't have, the small businesses do not have a lot of vision in regards to what green opportunities are out there. I agree that there are many, but how can we educate those small businesses, greater outreach to educate the SMEs, that those of us on the border, what could we do out there? I'm a banker, but I don't know how many other private bankers are here, private service bankers, or you can raise your hand. That's part of our challenge, and I hope that the bank, that this room will be full of banks like me, so we can talk about that rhetoric and that talk. So I welcome your thoughts and your comments about what can we do as bankers to reach out to the SMEs to talk about the opportunities, as that panel says.
Good.
And Bea, would you like to go first?
On USMCA and the mix, and the skewed composition of consumption, between goods and services. I mean, I think USMCA on the good side, I mean, let's be honest, it's more restrictive than NAFTA, okay? It's less trade in goods, all things the same than NAFTA was, just because it has more restrictions and requirements for Mexico, in particular, the automotive industry. So, but on the other hand, on the services side, it's more liberal, obviously, and more inclusive and more modern than NAFTA was. And so it includes, trade and services and digital services and e-commerce and so forth to a much greater degree than NAFTA did, obviously. So I think USMCA is different in that regard. I mean, it has some pros and some cons with regard to goods and services trade. With regard to what's going on right now, I think we expect the consumption in goods to revert, to normal eventually, and services to also come back up in terms of services consumption. But of course, it won't happen until the virus is, mitigated, mostly gone. The threat of infection is more, is close to eliminated. So the service sector is really dependent on the virus resurgence.
Yes, and going to the second question, I don't know if Benjamin or you want to talk about a little bit about the opportunities you see on your practice and how to get medium and small enterprises. I mean, or any other. I mean, Don Pedro, Jessie, if you want to comment.
Well, some thoughts come to my head. I think that el valor integrado, the national value that has to be put in some final product or final projects will enhance or can enhance the local component and will benefit the local economy. This has been in Mexico law for many years. However, I think it has to be upgraded and it has to be followed up by the government. I mean, that's the best way to integrate small companies into large projects. Obviously, a small company, perhaps they don't have the huge amount of money to enter into this kind of projects. However, el contenido nacional, national contents, I think it's a good mechanism. And I'm not a banker, so I think that some banks have flexibilized their opinions or their rules in connection with projects, at least in the northern part of Mexico. No, the rules have changed from 3 years now, and even though some investments and some finance have come into Mexico, and I think that the banks have changed a little bit their mindset, and they understand that this is not the situation that we had about 3 years ago. No, so many banks are working on that. I mean, it's not an easy shift. They have to do a lot of work, syndicate loans, etc. But I think that's a way to canalize finance into the companies. No?
Any other comment on that? Okay, Gonzalo, ¿want to say?
Sí, perdón, tenemos una pregunta perdón, es que no es mi celular. De las personas que están viéndonos por la transmisión que estamos mandando, sí. Aquí es una pregunta del panel. Cuando hacen análisis de proyectos donde tienen doble retorno de inversión, uno social y otro financiero, ¿qué factores son tomados en cuenta para convencer a los inversionistas de que el proyecto es necesario, sobre todo para tener un impacto social necesario? La pregunta.
Anybody wants to volunteer, or I go? Okay, I think it's, I mean, it depends on each bank, but as I was saying previously, I think now that we're talking more about sustainable development, even commercial banks are taking care of that. So when you define a project, it's not only the financial part, it's also to see how the governance, how the environmental and social part are integrated in a project. In terms of us, how do we define? Okay, our main topic is to find projects that have an environmental infrastructure projects that have an environmental value for the border region. We work with the communities because we have to have a clear understanding of what's the communities. We do have a lot of involvement in having public consultations and getting to see that project is going to be needed and it's going to be supported by communities. So in that sense, we have embedded in our process that kind of considerations. I think that I will leave it there, and it's the way we tackle things.
We have time for one more question before we wrap up.
Okay, good. Please.
Gracias, buenos días a todas y todos. Yo soy Laura Yaneli Rodríguez y soy regidora del Ayuntamiento de Ciudad Juárez. Coordino la Comisión de Ecología y Protección Civil. Yo quiero compartirles un logro que obtuvimos en esta administración. Ciudad Juárez fue una de las 5 ciudades del país seleccionada para unirnos al Pacto Global de Alcaldes por el Clima y la Energía. La convocatoria que emitió el Programa de Cooperación Internacional de la Unión Europea tuvo como consecuencia de ese pacto el que desarrolláramos un plan de acción climática con el compromiso de reducir las emisiones de gases que provocan el calentamiento global y aplicar planes de acción propios. El Ayuntamiento de Juárez recibió por parte del Programa de Cooperación Urbana Internacional de la Unión Europea acompañamiento técnico durante 15 meses que dio como resultado nuestro Plan de Acción Climática para el municipio de Juárez 2020-2030. En este plan se diseñaron medidas de mitigación, adaptación y algunas complementarias y tiene como meta reducir el 18% de las emisiones totales de gases de efecto invernadero. El plan fue publicado recientemente el 30 de enero de este año. Fue publicado en el periódico oficial del Estado. El interés que compartimos en este tema, este plan, esta administración está por terminar, pero este plan continúa hasta el 2030. Sería ideal que NADBank pudiera apoyar alguno de los proyectos que forman parte del plan que contiene medidas de ejecución a corto, mediano y largo plazo. Ya se ha dicho aquí que compartimos temas de interés tan importantes como la calidad de nuestro aire, que el aire no tiene fronteras. Yo quiero agradecer la importante labor que hace NADBank y todos los aquí reunidos desde cada una de nuestras trincheras por el medio ambiente. Este gran logro que fue obtenido por nuestra ciudad va a tener consecuencias positivas para la calidad de nuestro aire y pues eso debe ser de interés de todos. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the panel. We're going to take a 30-minute coffee break so everybody can stretch their legs. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. And we'll see you back in the room at 11:15, please. Thank you.